Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Tally and the Angel, Book 1, India, by Eleanor Dixon, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Prologue. Tally raced into the airport departure hall, not caring that she was acting more like a 6-year-old than a nearly 13-year-old. The excitement was unbearable. This would be her first trip on a plane. No good waiting for Dad. He was walking far too slowly. She ran to the center of the vast hall, dodging people, trolleys, and suitcases, and skidded to a halt, oblivious of the hurrying passengers who tutted and swerved around her. It was amazing. There was so much noise and so many colors, so many people. She twirled around, glowing as she gazed at them all. Some were dressed in winter woolies and must be heading for the snow. Some were dressed in lighter, brighter clothes, surely destined like her for warmer climates. There were businessmen hurrying along in suits, mums with babies in pushchairs, people of all nationalities scrutinizing the electronic boards or kissing loved ones goodbye. There was so much to look at. She wanted to hug herself. It was so exhilarating. But then that familiar wave of sadness crept up to remind her why she'd never been on a plane before, and she felt slightly guilty at letting herself forget. Somewhat more soberly, she turned around to search for her dad, whom she'd left to battle with the trolley and suitcases. There he was. His expression was empty and his eyes slightly glassy. It just wasn't right. He looked so lonely without Mum. The last traces of Tally's excitement snuffed out like a candle. In her mind, she was back in the chapel of rest, watching the curtain draw around Mum's coffin. She squeezed her eyes shut to wipe out the scene. What had Mum ordered her to do? Be happy, Tally. Be happy. She took a deep breath, so that's what she would do. Tally ran to her dad and slipped one hand into his, while reaching up to cradle the pendant at her throat with the other. Chapter 1. 1 week earlier. Few know me. I have remained hidden for thousands of years. Tally jumped at the knock on her bedroom door and hastily wiped her eyes on the corner of the duvet. "Come in," she croaked, forcing herself to sit up and sound as normal as possible, though she didn't think she'd made a great job of it. Aaron Carter came in. "Already in bed, Poppet?" Tally nodded, and as she looked up into her dad's haggard face, she wanted to cry all over again. He sat next to her, and she burrowed under his arm to lay her cheek against his chest, deriving some comfort from the warmth arising from his jumper. He stretched his legs out along the top of the duvet beside her own underneath. In his hand was a small box and an envelope. Tally wanted to ask about them, but didn't trust her voice not to crack. Dad spoke first. "We'll be all right, kiddo," he whispered. "It's good to cry, but Mom would have preferred us to be happy. So, after today, let's try to put on a brave face, shall we?" Tally didn't want to put on a brave face. She just wanted to disappear under her duvet and cry till she fell asleep, and then not feel anything. How could she be brave when she would never see her beautiful, gentle mother again? Didn't anyone understand how it felt? Even though her mum, once a ballerina, had been ill for months, and Tally had had time to get used to the idea that she would die, she'd never really believed it, never allowed herself to picture how life would be once that terrible thing happened. She drew a shuddery breath and nodded into Dad's chest. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. He just squeezed her tight. Eventually, he said, "Tal, I have something for you," as he extracted himself from her fierce hug. He held up the box and envelope. "But first, let me tell you something I think might cheer you up." He put the 2 items on the bedside table. Tally sat up and wriggled around on the bed so she faced him. It didn't look as if what Dad wanted to say was going to be cheery. His face was gray. He looked as if he looked as if he was in agony. Tally swallowed her apprehension. Her heart began to pound and her breath shortened like she'd been running. Dad scanned her face. "Deep breath, sweetheart," he murmured. "Don't panic. It's nothing bad," he added dubiously. Then so quietly that Tally almost didn't hear him. "Perhaps it's not the right moment. I never was very good at timing." He sighed and spoke in a rush, like Tally did when she was afraid that if she didn't say everything all at once, she'd lose her nerve. The thing is, your mom and I talked a lot about what I would do once she'd gone, and I've made some decisions. I've taken a sabbatical from the hospital, and... What's a sabbatical? Tally interrupted, finding her voice at last. It's a period of paid leave, Dad explained. They have allowed me a year under the circumstances. Theoretically, I should get 2, as I've been there for 14 years, but times are hard. He tilted his head to check she'd understood, and she nodded cautiously. Anyway, Dad clenched his fists, as if what he was about to say was hurting him. Mom and I could see how much you love school, and I'd hate to drag you away from it, but I really want to travel. As you know, Mom traveled lots when she was dancing, but after we had you, she didn't want to. And then we couldn't because of her illness. But it's always been my dream, and we talked about it, how it would be the best thing for me to do once she'd gone. He took a big, shuddery breath. Tally held her breath. Where would they go? Dad was continuing. Of course, it would be the hardest thing on earth to leave you, but I understand how you wouldn't want to quit the school you love. All your friends, your activities, your schoolwork, especially as you're doing so well, top of the class and all that. Tally felt the blood drain out of her face. So, Mom and I decided to let you be a boarder. Tally gasped. Dad faltered. Is that a smiley and a thumbs up? He asked. Then he frowned. I'm afraid it wouldn't be straight away. I couldn't bear to part from you just yet. But I was thinking maybe next term, once things have calmed down a bit and we've gotten used to life being different. Tally was sure her heart had found its way to the bottom of her stomach. But Dad was rushing on. Of course, in the holidays you'd fly out to wherever I am, if you want to, that is, or I would come back and we'd spend them here. We'd still see as much of each other, just not daily. I'd miss you like crazy, but I do understand that you'd rather be with your friends of your own age and in a school you love. Tally stared at him, speechless. School she loved? She absolutely hated it. And she had no friends. The other girls ignored her and called her a swot because she was always top of the class. They were always getting together at the weekends to go shopping or to the cinema and never invited her to join in. They huddled in groups in corridors, giggling about boys and makeup, then stopped talking when she walked by, only to screech with laughter after she'd gone past. Love it? She never wanted to see the place again, never mind stay there day and night for weeks on end. She had mentioned none of this during Mum's illness, of course, but secretly she had hoped, once it was all over, she'd be able to persuade Dad to let her go to a normal state school instead of the private academy. Finding her voice at last, she croaked, You can't leave me too. Please, Daddy, please don't leave me. She gripped the duvet, twisting the fabric. Dad stared at her in horror. I'm not talking about going right now, Tally. In a few months or so, I was thinking. And I wouldn't be leaving you. I'd just be away during term time. I thought you'd love it. It wouldn't be much different to now. I'm always so busy at the hospital, and you're usually in bed by the time I get home. I couldn't stand it, Tally cried. Mom's gone and you'd go too. I'd be all alone like an orphan. And in that hateful school? Please don't make me go back. It's the worst place in the world. Please, Daddy, don't do it. The hot tears started to stream down her already red and sore cheeks, but she did nothing to stop them. Her father scooped her up into his arms and squeezed her tight. What's all this? He asked, amazed. What hateful school? Between sniffles and gulps, Tally tried to explain to him how she'd become an outcast among the other girls, and that spending her time studying and doing well in her lessons was the only thing left for her to do because no one talked to her during the break times. Dad's distress made his voice raspy. We had no idea. We thought you were so happy there. Have you been keeping all this secret for Mum's sake? Tally nodded miserably. Oh, Tally, Dad breathed. How could you be so grown up? That was so brave. Tally shuddered. I heard Mum telling Auntie Jane that she would feel so much better if she knew I was happy, she whispered. So I pretended to make her better, but it didn't work. She didn't get better, she finished miserably. Dad stared at the duvet, his eyes slightly wet. Well, this changes everything, he said at last. Of course I won't go, my darling. I'll go back to the hospital and we'll find a different school for you. Don't you worry about that. We'll carry on as normal. I never imagined. He swallowed. Tally felt a stab of guilt. Dad must have spent ages perfecting his plan, thinking she would jump at it. Why can't we go traveling together? She choked suddenly. But, Tally, you have to go to school, Dad exclaimed, lifting his dark eyes to gaze into her clear blue ones. Do I? The glimmer of an idea had formed in Tally's mind, and she grasped it. Why? Why can't you teach me? Lots of people are homeschooled. We travel, and you tutor me as we go along. Thoughts tumbled around her head as her brainwave took on a life of its own. It would be fantastic, she breathed. We'd do lessons in the morning and sightseeing in the afternoons. I'd learn far more than in the classroom, and I'd work really, really hard. I would do everything you said and wouldn't let you down. I'd do all the homework you set me, never ask to watch TV, never complain about having to study anything, never be a nuisance, Whoa, 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 whoa. Dad put up his hands to stop her. He stood up and walked over to the window. Tally held her breath. Dad turned round and looked at her, his eyes heavy with grief. I don't know, sweetheart, he said. This has all come as such a shock. I can't quite get my head around it. Leave it with me, but don't press me. It was as much as Tally could hope for, and anyway, at least he hadn't totally trashed her idea, but then he was like that, her dad. He always had time for her, and always gave his full attention to anything she said. Perhaps being a consultant surgeon made him more thoughtful and willing to listen to other people. Or maybe he had become such a good doctor because of his considerate nature. Whatever. Mentally, Tally crossed her fingers. She would have to wait and see. Now, he said, picking up the 2 mysterious items he'd brought in with him. This envelope and gift are from Mum. She insisted that I wait till after the funeral to give it to you, and she gave me strict instructions that you had to read the letter before you opened the box. Tally stretched out a shaking hand and took the 2 treasures from her dad. The box measured about the size of her fist and was made of a beautiful orange wood. It glowed warmly as though someone had polished it daily for generations. The cream envelope was thick and heavy in an old-fashioned way. I'll leave you to it, Dad murmured as he dropped a kiss on her forehead and stood up. Don't worry about anything. We'll work it out. Call me if you need me, otherwise I'll see you in the morning. Night, Dad, said Tally, letting out a long-held breath. He closed the door and she turned over the envelope. Tears stung again as she read her name scrawled across it in her mum's rather untidy handwriting. Miss Natalie Carter.